Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. In today's video, we bring you a new initiative, which is the NCERT Foundation series, wherein we study the subject of political science or polity as it is better known in the UPSC parlance with the help of MCQs and certain PYQs. Now before we move ahead, let's first quickly discuss why NCERTs are considered to be the holy Bible for your UPSC journey. First and foremost, NCERTs are sourced directly from the government, which makes it your most reliable and authentic sources for preparation, both in terms of your concepts as well as in terms of your facts. Secondly, the language that NCERT uses is very crisp. It's precise, it's clear, it's simple, and it's analytical, much in line with how UPSC expects its aspirants to be. So it's very much in alignment with the demands of the UPSC. And finally, and most importantly, in the previous years, UPSC has lifted questions directly from the NCERTs, sometimes line by line. So in order to make this basic groundwork clear, it's important to not ignore your NCERTs and to take them very seriously. So, like I mentioned, questions have been lifted from the NCERTs as it is. So now that we've covered the basics, without further ado, let's plunge in. Question number 1, with reference to the features of democracy, consider the following statements. So we are discussing here in this question the features of democracy. Now, before we read the first statement, let's quickly discuss what democracy is. In its most fundamental form, democracy is any form of government where rulers are elected by the people, by the citizens. So in very simple terms, democracy is any form of government where the citizens elect their rulers. Now it's very similar, or it's almost very close to the definition that is most known to us, that is attributed to Abraham Lincoln, the former US president, who said that democracy is a form of government which is of the people, for the people, and by the people. So this comes very close to this. So like I said, in the most fundamental, most minimalistic manner, if we try to understand democracy, it has to do with elected representatives. Now that we have our grounds covered, let's go to the first statement. Final decision-making power must rest with elected representatives. Now, of course, the representatives are elected by the people. And if I elect a representative and if I, of my free will, choose someone to represent me, it means that I'm also resting my decision-making power in their hands to some extent, or at least to a lot of extent. So we can see that the first statement is correct. Now also notice that it uses the word must. So in a democracy, this must happen. Whenever we use the term must, we actually use it in the sense of ought. And ought means an ideal situation. In an ideal situation, this is the right thing to do. So this is a correct statement. Second, every election where people cast their vote is democratic. Now, one is very tempted to think that wherever there are elections, there's democracy. But let's try to understand it through an example. Let's take the example of China. Now, in China, the ruling party is the CPC, or the Communist Party of China. If you have to get elected to the legislatures of China, it is mandatory that you belong either to the CPC or to any of the parties that are allied to the CPC, which means they hold allegiance to the CPC. And not only this, another thing that happens is that all the candidates that are fielded for elections from these parties have to be pre-approved. So, which means the ruling party has to pre-approve candidates whether they can contest elections or not. Okay, elections are held regularly. But now that I'm bereft of any choice, now that I'm forced to vote only for these limited options, either the CPC or allied parties, parties with the same ideologies, same goals, same agenda, and also if I know that the candidates are pre-approved by the ruling parties, do I really have a fair and free choice? Do I have a choice? And if I have a choice, is it fair? Is it free? No. In this case, can these elections be called democratic? No. Right? You cannot call these elections or such elections democratic just by virtue of the fact that a vote is being cast in them. Therefore, we can rule out this statement. This is not a feature of democracy. Third, or at least we can say it's an insufficient feature of democracy. People have to elect their rulers, but of course, of their free will and out of informed choice and informed consent. Let's go to the third statement. A democracy must provide equality of vote to every adult citizen. This brings us to the concept of universal adult franchisee that is there in our own country, and also notice the use of the word must. Yes, a democracy ideally must provide equality of vote to every adult citizen. And similarly in our country, we also have universal adult franchisee where all adults over 18 years of age are allowed and required by law to cast their vote, and everybody's vote has an equal value, which means my vote does not get my vote does not get preference over another person's vote simply by virtue of my race, caste, gender, wealth, social status. All right. So out of the three statements, we have already eliminated second statement. If we come to these options A, B, C, and D, simply by virtue of eliminating the second statement, we arrive at a correct answer, which is option number C. 1 and 3 only. Now let's briefly look through the core features of democracy as listed in your NCERT. So the first feature is that leaders are elected by the people and make major decisions on their behalf. This we have fairly covered just a few minutes ago. Elections are free and fair. Rulers can be removed if people are not satisfied. So free and fair, again, a mandatory condition for or an essential feature for democracy. If you are having namesake elections, then you're probably doing something wrong and do not qualify as a democratic government. The whole idea of fair election means that the ruling party has a chance, a fair chance of losing the elections. So the whole idea of an election being fair is that if I am the ruler, I should be able, there should be a possibility for me to lose the election. In the case of CPC, we saw there is no possibility of CPC losing the elections because the candidates are pre-approved by them and only their allied parties are allowed to contest. So there is no way they would ever lose their elections. Furthermore, rulers can be removed if people are not satisfied. There could be re-elections. Okay. Every adult citizen has one vote. Every vote has equal value. We've just discussed universal adult franchisee. Finally, government functions within limits set by the Constitution and respects citizens' rights. Now, here is the thing. If a government is so powerful that it was elected by the will of the people, it's very likely that it might turn tyrannical. Okay? So, in order to put checks and limits to the power of that government, we require a constitution. And why do we require a constitution? In order to check unlimited powers of the ruling party. I hope that's clear. So these are the essential features of the democracy or democratic form of the government. Now, the Constitution puts a lot of checks on a democracy by various means, which we'll be doing in subsequent sessions. Question 2, in the context of democratic elections, which of the following are essential or is essential? So we are talking about democratic elections. First statement says free and fair competition between political parties. Is it essential? Yes, we just discussed. Free and fair competition is essential. Mere elections, mere casting of vote is not the sufficient condition of democracy. So yes. Second, possibility of ruling party losing elections. Very, very important. Yes, it should have, the ruling party should be capable of losing the elections. Third, approval of candidates by a ruling party before contesting. No, absolutely not. This is contrary to the spirit of a democracy or a democratic election. So again, if we eliminate the third statement from your options, we are left with either A or B, and we see that first two statements are correct. So we have our correct answer, which is option number B. Question third, the ability of democracy to correct its own mistakes is ensured through. Now we just discussed, while we were discussing the core features of democracy, that if at all citizens are dissatisfied, they can change the government. Okay? A change of government is possible through elections, re-elections, if citizens are dissatisfied with the ruling government. So let's see how, if mistakes are made, how it is corrected in a democracy. The option A is military oversight. No, military power, military strength is not there for correcting mistakes in a democracy. We can rule this out. B, public discussion and elections. Yes, this comes closest to the essence of democracy or rectification of mistakes in a democracy. Third, strong bureaucracy. Now, bureaucracy has more to do with implementation and less to do with correction of mistakes. So whether wrong decision or right, bureaucracy is going to implement those decisions. The correction is only going to be happened, the correction is only going to happen, I beg your pardon, by public discussion followed by elections. So we can rule this out. Pressure from external powers. Absolutely not. Democracy has to do with will of the people, not the will of foreigners. Okay? Nowhere in the definition of democracy it says that it has to do with will of people. So we can arrive at the right answer, which is option number B. I hope this is clear. The questions are fairly simple as of now, but as the series progresses, we'll move ahead to more advanced questions and concepts. But before I move forward to the next slide, let me introduce you to our NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. The admissions are open for this course. Please get yourselves enrolled. And the features are that you'll be given 150 plus classes to cover your basic NCERTs and to cover all your core concepts. And this will be accessible for 2 years. The course has a validity for 2 years. Now, the good part is that if you take admission in this NCERT online course, then if you ever visit our offline centers like Lucknow, Prayagraj, Karol Bagh, Noida, Indore or Jaipur, then if you visit these centers and decide to take admission in our IAS GS Foundation classroom course, then you will get a full fee waiver equaling the amount that you have paid for this online course. Okay. Now, if you want more details, you can click on the link in the description or you can dial 87501 87501. Which of the following arguments are often raised against democracy? Now, please pay attention. We're talking about arguments against. We've discussed a lot in favor of democracy. Let's see what loopholes democracy could have or some shortcomings. 1, it leads to delays in decision making. Yes, it's a very big likelihood that democracy may lead to delays because it's not a unilateral decision making mechanism. On the contrary, there is an involvement of multiple stakeholders and multiple perspectives. Now, if we are trying to accommodate multiple stakeholders and their perspectives, of course, decision making is likely to be delayed. It's likely to be delayed because you have to accommodate points of view of differing parties, opinions that are different from your own. Okay, that is the beauty of democracy. It causes instability due to frequent change of leaders. True, this is also a very valid argument and we can learn this from our own country. Now, this is 1996-97 that we're talking about. The shortest government, the shortest serving prime minister was Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. And this is 1996. And his government was toppled within a matter of days. Now, you have to tell me in the comments how many days did he serve as the Prime Minister of India in 1996. Now, this is Mr. Vajpayee, but after him came Mr. H.D. Deve Gowda. Now, what happened with Deve Gowda ji? He also did not complete a 1-year tenure. And Mr. Deve Gowda was succeeded by Mr. I.K. Gujral. What happened next? Also did not complete a 1-year term. So you see, frequent toppling governments did lead to instability. So yes, the second statement is correct. The third statement says it provides peaceful resolution of conflicts. Yes, like we just said, mistakes are rectified not with the help of military power, but with the help of debates and discussions and elections. So there is a peaceful resolution of conflicts. But is this an argument against democracy? No, it's an argument in favor of democracy. The third statement can be ruled out. Going by the method of elimination, no, no, no. Hence, option A is your correct answer. Which of the following are essential features of a constitutional democracy? Let's see. We discussed about how constitution puts limits to the power of the government. How does constitution puts limits to the power of the government? First, respect for citizens' rights. Absolutely. And in our very own constitution, we have part 3, which talks about fundamental rights. That is like the perfect recipe. That is like an assured thing to provide to the citizens in the form of rights. The fundamental rights in part 3 of our constitution. Rule of law. Yes, rule of law is essential to a democracy. right? It means that there'll be no anarchy, no chaos. Everybody will follow the same law. Everybody will follow the law and they will follow the same law. So yes, this is an essential feature of a constitutional democracy. Third, unlimited powers to the ruling party. Now, this is precisely why we need a constitutional democracy, just to keep a check on the unlimited powers of the ruling party. So we can simply eliminate this and arrive at the correct answer, which happens to be option A. Which feature distinguishes democracy from monarchy or dictatorship? Now, before we come to this question, let's try and understand. We have already understood what democracy is. Let's try and understand what is monarchy and what is dictatorship. So, in a monarchy, a hereditary law of succession is followed, which means that if my father is the king, I am going to accede to the throne after him, whether or not I am meritorious or whether or not people want me to be there. Okay, it's hereditary, it's not merit based, and it's definitely not democratic in the sense that will of the people is not really taken into account. Now, it can be of two types, either absolute, like the case we just discussed, or constitutional. Now, in case of constitutional monarchy, the monarch is head of the state, but the government forms the laws. Okay, so the example is UK, and here we can take examples from the Middle East. Okay, so in any which way, this is what happens in a monarchy. Now, what happens in a democracy? Sorry, we've already covered democracy. What happens in a dictatorship? What happens in a dictatorship is that there is a seizure of territory. Territories are controlled and seized with the help of military strength, military might, and it is force. So there is a lot of coercion involved. People do not surrender or submit of their free will. So here military might usually is involved. Any kind of force is involved in dictatorship. And as we know, there is a unilateral decision making also involved. Now, let's see, when the question says which feature distinguishes democracy from these two, it means what is that feature here in the options which is unique to democracy. So hereditary succession is not unique to democracy. Rule of law, like I explained, in the case of a constitutional monarchy, there could be or there is a rule of law. So it's not, it is a feature of democracy, but it is not unique to democracy. So we can rule this out. Active political participation of citizens. Now this option is unique only to democracy, does not exist either in monarchy or dictatorship. And same with centralized authority, it sounds more like a dictatorship or somewhat like an absolute monarchy. Now the question 7th is assertion and reasoning based. Democracies are less likely to experience famines. This is your assertion. And the reason is democracies are accountable to the people through opposition parties and free press. Now let's try to understand the assertion. It says that democracies are less likely to experience famine. Is this true? Is this assertion true? Yes, because if we go by historical data, and let's consider the example of India, we have not had a single famine, since post-independence. Since 1947, India has not experienced any famine. However, if we consider countries like China, China had the Great Famine from 1959 to 61. There was mass starvation and people were really suffering. Now the reasoning says, now we have settled our assertion and we can fairly agree that, of course, famines are less likely to occur in democracies. But if we go by the reasoning, it says democracies are more accountable because they have opposition parties and a free press. Now this interesting reason can be attributed to a great Nobel laureate, Mr. Amartya Sen, the economist. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. So this reasoning, this argument was given by Mr. Amartya Sen, who said that in a democracy, because of opposition parties and because of free press, famines are less likely to occur. And why this happens is because opposition parties are very likely to bring attention to mass starvation. Famine entails what? It entails mass starvation. And free press is very likely to report it. Opposition parties are going to be after the government to take care of the situation. Hence, democracies will be very quick in order to save the ruling party. In order to save itself, the ruling party will be very quick to treat the situation, to address the situation, and mass starvation, therefore, is not possible in a democracy. It's very likely because of these two factors. So we've seen that the assertion is correct. We've also seen that the reasoning is correct too. Hence, option A, which says both A and R are correct, and R is the correct explanation of A, is the correct answer. I hope all of this is making sense. Question 8, which of the following reflects the minimal definition of democracy? Now notice the term minimal. Right at the beginning of this session, I told you that the definition that we arrived at is the bare minimum, the most fundamental definition of democracy that you could think of, which means that democracy is the form of government wherein citizens elect their rulers. Therefore, in order for any government to be qualified as a democracy, it should have elections where elected representatives have some sort of decision-making power. So A, citizens have equal access to economic resources. Is that the minimal definition of democracy? No. Ideally, perhaps they should. Minimally, even if they have the right to vote, we are good. Option B, rulers are chosen by the people through free and fair elections. Yes, this qualifies as the minimal definition of democracy. Let's quickly look at the other options. Judiciary is completely independent of the legislature. Ideally, judiciary should be, but it is not the minimum definition. And citizens are guaranteed universal education and health care. Not really. I mean, they should be, but they're not. So we have the correct answer, which is option number B. Question 9, in the context of democracy as an ideal, which of the following are correct? Now here we have used the word ideal as against the previous question where we were talking about the term minimal. So minimally, it has to do with elections. But let's see what has an ideal government to do with, or an ideal democracy to do with. Every citizen should have equal right to vote. Yes, they should. That also stands true for a bare minimum definition of democracy. However, in certain countries, unlike ours, we see that certain groups have more voting rights, or their the weightage of their votes are more as compared to ours. And secondly, every citizen should also have equal resources, education and information to participate meaningfully. Now, does this happen in real life? No, but we are talking about an ideal situation. So ideally, this should happen. Therefore, 1 and 2 both are correct, and your answer is option C. The last question for the day with reference to decision making in a democracy. Consider the following. Decisions are based on consultation and discussion. Yes, we've covered it sufficiently in the preceding questions that multiple stakeholders are involved and a unilateral perspective is avoided. A lot of discussion is involved in a democracy. This process takes time but reduces chances of rash decisions. Absolutely correct. Because I am taking the opinions of multiple stakeholders, I am minimizing my chances of error. I am minimizing my chances of errors. However, I still cannot guarantee that my decisions are going to be absolutely error-free. But I can still reduce my chances of error substantially. Third, it ensures that majority opinion always overrides minority rights. No, like we said, at least in a constitutional democracy, what happens is that there are a lot of provisions that protect the rights of the minority. And also by virtue of the fact that everybody is given equal vote and no minorities are discriminated against, we can simply rule this statement out. So we have first and the second options which are correct, and therefore it leads us to the correct answer, which is option number A. Now before we move ahead, I would like once again to draw your attention to the NCERT online course brought to you by Drishti IAS for your UPSC foundation. Now we've discussed in sufficient detail that NCERTs form the holy grail of your UPSC journey. So please go ahead and check this course out. The features are that it gives you 150 plus classes to cover the course and the validity is for 2 years, which means you'll be able to access these classes for good 2 years. The admissions are open for this course, and if you purchase this online course and visit any of our IAS GS foundation courses in any of our offline centers, you'll get a full fee waiver amounting to the price you've paid for the NCERT online course. Now, if you want more details, you can click on the link in the description or you can call 87501 for more details. Now, finally, I'll give you a practice question, which is the strongest argument in favor of democracy is that ensures A, economic prosperity, B, dignity and equality of citizens, C, absence of corruption, or D, efficiency in decision making. Now, please notice the word strongest argument. This is your hint to solve this question, okay? Because these are all very much arguments in favor of democracy. But you have to tell me which one of them is the strongest and why do you think that is the strongest. Send me your answers in the comment section. If you really enjoyed today's session, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Today we did democracy. The next class, I'll come with a different topic and with more MCQs. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.